Welcome and good morning to everybody. My name is Maria Sacragosi. I'm President and CEO of Georgia Bio. We're pleased to have everyone joining us today, and welcome to those that are not on yet, but will be joining us shortly. As a reminder, this webinar is recorded. We tend to get quite a few post-event watches on our YouTube channel, so I encourage you, if you're not able to see it all, go back and watch it and share it after the fact, tagging us. Before we get started, just a housekeeping item. If you have questions along the way, I invite you to drop them into the Q&A portion at the bottom of the Zoom webinar for all of our attendees. And there certainly is a chat function. You can reach out to us if you need to. As a reminder, Georgia Bio is the Life Sciences Trade Association in the state of Georgia. Our members include everyone from the biotech sector to the medical device sector and pharma and everywhere in between. We're very grateful to all of our members. I would encourage you to renew your membership if you haven't, or get more engaged as we roll out some new committees in the coming week. We're going to kick today off with a session wrap up from the Georgia legislative session. I was very pleased and Melissa Carter was able to join us as our new head of policy the first day of session, and she'll be speaking to us a little bit later in the session. But to kick us off, I will invite Carla, our current chair for our Policy and Advocacy Committee, who is Director for State Government Affairs in the East Coast for Neurocrine Biosciences, to kick us off about session before she hands it over to our lobbyist, Sally Kilpatrick of Cornerstone Government Affairs, and then Leslie Wood at Pharma. So, Carla?
Thank you. I appreciate it. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Again, we have a packed schedule. We appreciate you taking the time out to join us, but I think you're going to find this is going to be incredibly valuable as we wrap up session and we move into planning for 2025. We were quite busy, and the session, as always, had some twists and turns, but I think we came out quite ahead and did some really important work. And with that, I'm going to introduce Sally Kilpatrick with Cornerstone Government Affairs to give us a general overview of session and the road ahead. So I'm going to turn it to Sally.
Thank you, Carla. Good morning, everyone. Well, this is another election year session here in Georgia. For those not as familiar, we start our session, we kick it off the second week in January, and we usually wrap up by the end of March, early April. We have a May primary deadline, and so during election years such as this, our folks want to get out and raise money and get ahead of that. And I will say this session, I'll start with an overview and then kind of focus more in on the issues that Georgia Bio was following. But again, this is an election year. You have Biden and Trump, and we are now seeing the national politics trickle down to the states. And Georgia is very much in play on the national scale. And so we saw a lot of Republican red meat issues that were very little in substance, but were great to take home to voters and get them riled up in the primary. And so I would say a lot of focus was put on issues that our group was not following. And so, elections, things of that nature. But all in all, for bio, it was a little quiet, I would say, on our front. We did focus on the budget. This year, Georgia had a record $36 billion budget, which is a big one for us. And we worked very hard. Mel and I worked with the House and Senate appropriators to help increase our funding for the Rural Teacher Training Initiative, which I know a lot of companies that are part of Georgia Bio rely on when we're looking at training the future workforce and educating a lot of these teachers in rural areas of Georgia that don't really know the types of jobs that are available in our industry. And so Maria and I started working on this program, I think 6 years ago, maybe 5, but and it is each year it's been more successful. And so now after this session, we are going to be at $500,000 a year for this program, which we're very excited about. Right now, the budget process is kind of brutal to get your money through. So we were We were unsuccessful last year, but successful this year. So that's a big win for Georgia Bio. A few of the other issues that had the most attention in Georgia, and this might be pretty similar in other states too. I know that tort reform was supposed to be our big push this year, especially with Governor Kemp in the offseason last year talking a lot about it. However, that fell flat. I think there were a few small bills that might have passed, but overall tort reform for our business community, for the companies, what we care about, none of that happened. So that was unfortunate, and that will be something that I think the broader business community will focus on in the years to come. On the healthcare front, certificate of need, we are a certificate of need state, and that took center stage. It took a lot of time and attention in both chambers. It was kind of the big elephant in the room in a lot of ways because the Senate really wanted, Lieutenant Governor especially, really wanted a health CON reform bill. And so ultimately they came to an agreement on a bill, and it's actually going to get signed by the governor on Friday in Augusta. So that was a big ticket item here. The other focus, I would say, was on tax reform, and in many ways, a lot of stuff didn't pass. They did pass a bill to phase out one of the data center tax credits. So that will be in front of the governor. We don't know if he'll sign it or not, but and then they did lower the income tax slightly, and they're signing that bill actually today. The governor is. The other big issue that we focused on, again, the broader business community, not just Georgia Bio, was Georgia's data privacy bill. I know across the country, each state has their own. Some are more egregious than others. Ours started out okay. We got to a point where I think they were comfortable, and then it completely changed. And Mel worked very hard with other stakeholders and tracking that bill and asking for exemptions. And ultimately, we were exempted from the bill, but it failed. It failed in the House. There's no appetite from the speaker to take that up. Let's see. The other thing I will mention is there's always one bill that flies under the radar that we all seem to miss. And that is Senate Bill 368, which I think that I know not like Bio in DC has even sent in a veto on this one. So essentially, the Secretary of State's office had a bill that they were focused on foreign political giving. And somehow from where it started to where it ended, it turned into a very, very disastrous bill for American companies, American employees who work for foreign-based companies having to register as foreign agents. And those that do federal work, you probably know more than I do, but they left out a lot of the federal exemptions that would make this bill easier to comply with. I know that a lot of companies fall under a commercial exemption, and there were no exemptions. So it's very broad. And I had a meeting with the governor's office on Monday. I know that they told me that they've received over 30 letters, a lot of phone calls, a lot of meeting requests to veto this bill. And so I would think that might be the most high profile bill right now in front of the governor to ask for a veto. But all that to say is it was a very fast, very political session here. I'm glad it's over. We are heading into elections just for our General Assembly members. None of our statewide candidates are on the ballot. That will happen in 2 years. So every member is up. There were a number of retirements. So we'll see a lot of new faces next year. And the governor in Georgia has 40 days to sign or veto bills. And so that deadline is May 7th. And so we're coming up on it. So more to come, after that. And I know that Mel and I will work together to put together a report to let you guys know what makes it and what doesn't. But we feel confident our money will stay in. And I'm happy to answer any questions, but that's the overview.
Great. Thank you very much, Sally. So we're going to hand this over to Leslie with the Regional VP for State Policy with Pharma. Hey, Leslie.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Just wanted to touch on a few priorities for pharma this morning. Of course, our first and foremost issue is we're trying to reduce costs for patients and reduce the out-of-pocket costs for patients. And I know that everyone's been working really hard on our Share the Savings policy, and Bethany has all of the history of that if anyone has any questions. But basically, like, we know that, you know, over 50% of the manufacturer's list price is going to others in the supply chain, the PBMs, the hospitals, insurers, and things like that. And we're giving over $250 billion in rebates, discounts, and fees to these supply chain entities. And we really need that money to get down to the patients. We've seen a lot of misaligned incentives, especially, for example, in insulins, where the net price of the drug can be, you know, up to 60 to 80%, even more off of the list price. But yet patients have been seeing their out-of-pocket costs go up over time. So I'm sure, as many of you know, with the Share the Savings legislation, we really want patients, if they have a coinsurance, if they have a requirement to pay that percentage of the list price, we really want them to be paying as close as possible a percentage off of net price. Anything we can do to make sure that that money that manufacturers are reducing their drugs by, that patients are actually benefiting from that. So definitely Share the Savings will continue to be our biggest proactive push in Georgia moving forward. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about our defensive priorities. Price controls, really anything to try to have the government step in and set a price of the medicine. Obviously, we've seen that at the federal level with the Inflation Reduction Act. And for the first time, the government's going to step in and cap those Medicare prices. We really think that that is going to hurt patients over time with respect to access, and then with respect to what we can reinvest into research and development. We've been seeing a lot of affordability boards come on in a lot of the states, but I think with respect to Georgia, we're thinking our biggest threat could be 340B mandates. 340B is a really interesting thing to be talking about with respect to state regulation. I've been at pharma for more than 15 years now. 340B would pop up here and there, and we'd say, like, that's a federal program, states should not be regulating, and that's pretty much where things ended. However, this 340B pricing was really legislated in Congress in the 90s to help vulnerable patients without insurance to really see significant discounts in prescription medicines through certain qualifying hospitals and clinics. And around that time in the early 90s, about 45 hospitals were qualifying for the program. But what we've seen now is really a significant, dramatic increase. Even year over year now, we're seeing about 25% expansion of this program. And it's about $54 billion in purchases every year. So that's second only to Medicare Part D. And what's happened is that it used to be, because contract pharmacies are not even contemplated really in federal law, that patient would go to the clinic or hospital that qualified, get their services, and then receive their medicines from an on-site pharmacy. But then some places might not have had that on-site pharmacy, and then they're contracting. We call them contract pharmacies. I'm sure many of you have seen this in legislation, maybe with your colleagues in other states. And so what's happened is we've really seen like a huge uptake expansion, especially with PBMs. More than 40% of these contract pharmacies are linked to PBMs, just turning revenue and not necessarily related to even a 340B patient. Those of us who have insurance, we could be going to, for example, a CVS, receiving a 340B drug because they might be a contract pharmacy, and we wouldn't even know it, and we're not receiving discounts from that, nor should we who are well insured be receiving that discount. So what happened is some companies were saying, hey, we'd like to see some data to verify that you are purchasing this on behalf of a 340B patient. And of course, now we're seeing things where there are bans saying like, no, you can't have a modifier to track that in order to protect those revenue streams. And what we've really seen coming on in the last 3 years is this legislation to mandate that a manufacturer must ship to a contract pharmacy, even though these contract pharmacies, well, one, the state should not be regulating a federal program, and two, these contract pharmacies are not even recognized in federal law. So of course, we stringently oppose that. It's been a very difficult topic to talk to legislators about because it's very technical. I'm just dipping my toe in it today, and there's just so many more layers. And, you know, hospitals have gotten used to this revenue stream. And as we know, hospitals are in, you know, every legislative district where we aren't afforded that same sort of representation, obviously. So we do oppose those. I'm happy to answer any more questions on that, but I didn't want to get too far down the weeds.
Great. Thank you very much, Leslie. And I think, you know, Bio might be hitting on that too. We've been following 340B for quite some time and have regular calls about that.
We do.
And I just for those,
just for Georgia, if that's helpful in advocacy, we do have a fact sheet since more than 76 of the hospitals in Georgia are participating in the program, with more than 1,000 contract pharmacies located nationally. So we have some facts if that helps, if the conversations come up with legislators.
No, that would certainly be helpful, and we'd appreciate you sharing that. Great. So, and I just want to acknowledge Bethany Scherer, who is our local lead here in Atlanta with Pharma. We're very grateful to continue to build the relationship with Pharma as a close partner in our region. So,
thanks, Maria.
Well, thank you. So no problem. And I apologize, I'm bouncing around screens here, everybody. Our next item on the agenda, which is not popping up for me at all right now for whatever reason. There we go. We're going to see if anybody has any Q&A regarding state issues. And if I don't see any in the question box at the moment, but we'll dive a little bit more into some state issues in the look ahead portion of this webinar as well. So I'm just going to give it a minute to see if anyone has a question. And I just want to stress, when it comes to state relations, Georgia Bio is your partner on the ground here in Georgia, especially for our small companies, as well as our big companies, though, that already have policy people. But our small companies can always lean into us if they have questions, not only around state politics, so we can also be helpful if you're looking to invite your local politicians or your state delegation to visit your site or understand the industry or what your company does here. It is very helpful for our members to make connections with their policymakers in the areas they live and work, especially as we go into session. So not seeing any questions, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to pivot to some federal legislation updates. There's been a lot of activity. Mel just got back from the Hill actually late last night as we just finished our second fly-in in the last 6 weeks. So I think I'm going to invite Emily Michael, who's Director of Federal Government Relations at Bio, to kick us off, and then we'll transition to Nick at AdvaMed. So Emily?
Thanks, Maria. Thank you all for having me this morning. And thanks to Mel for being in DC yesterday for Bio's largest fly-in that we've had actually since the pandemic. So it was great. We had over 100 people on the Hill raising awareness of all the priorities, many of which have been mentioned on the call already today that we share with our state partners down in Georgia. So we're almost finished with a hectic week up here in DC before Congress goes back into recess for 1 week next week. And then they'll return again for what is panning out to be a busy May, with both government funding deadlines finally in the rearview mirror. Congress finally wrapped up 2024 funding in March of 2024. So obviously very far behind schedule. Lawmakers are finally starting to turn their attention to FY25 funding. which again, we are now behind on, in addition to several issues outside of healthcare. So it finally does look like both chambers will finalize their work on two long-term priorities that have been sucking up a lot of oxygen out of the room over the last month. That's funding for Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan, and then reauthorizing the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA. We got word yesterday that votes are expected in Congress over the weekend, so we really do anticipate Congress finally passing both of these by the end of the weekend, and then that will then hopefully allow them to move on and start focusing on some of these other priorities before everyone goes home to campaign for most of October and November. One other thing I wanted to mention, just because it's a newer issue that Congress does plan to devote floor time on both the House and the Senate, is some sort of funding vehicle that would fund the Francis Scott Key Bridge repair. That's something else that folks obviously did not anticipate having to spend time on this spring and summer, but will be a top priority for lawmakers. So moving on to more healthcare focused work, a lot of the issues again will mimic what you've heard on the state level, but we thought it was important for everyone to get kind of a federal update as well. Health committees in both chambers definitely remain steadfast in their efforts to shape policies with an eye towards the end of the fiscal year, and then a lame duck session in between the election and the end of the calendar year. Those will both be opportunities for potential healthcare vehicles to move. The committees in both chambers remain focused on affordability and transparency language, including for hospitals, for PBMs, diagnostic laboratories, and then generic drug competition also continues to come up. As folks may remember, the House passed their Lower Cost, More Transparency Act back at the end of last year. That includes some pretty critical hospital and PBM transparency policies that BIO does support. Unfortunately, over the negotiations that came up and occurred over the last few government deadlines, the House and Senate were not able to reach agreement on those policies. So that continues to be something that particularly retiring Chairwoman Kathy McMorris Rogers of the Energy and Commerce Committee really hopes to push through before the end of the year when she leaves Congress. We continue to work with both the House and the Senate on these policies, particularly the PBM transparency policies, to make sure we can get something across the finish line. Another issue that has definitely fallen to the wayside has been the country's pandemic preparedness laws. These remain largely unauthorized, as do many mental health and substance use disorder programs that Congress has not been able to come to consensus on. Over the past couple weeks, I will say we have seen a renewed push by pandemic preparedness champions on both sides of the aisle to pass the Pandemic and All Hazard Preparedness Act, commonly known as PAPA, especially in light of the current bird flu cases. So anticipate some more talk on that, and we're hopeful some movement. As a part of PAPA that passed the Senate last year, the medical countermeasure priority review voucher is also a critical priority of BIOS that we need to see reauthorized. So that's kind of pending and tied up in that process as well. As is the substance use disorder prevention that prevents opioid recovery and treatment for patients and communities act, better known as the Support Act. I'm trying not to get too throw too many acronyms at you, so I apologize now for these long bill names. But this is another critical opioid recovery treatment type bill that has lapsed over the course of the last year. So we're continuing to push for that to be reauthorized as well. And then something else that has sucked up a lot of oxygen out of the room over the past year, and I think will continue to do so, is physician pushes to update federal reimbursement laws. They really do want a longer term fix as opposed to these short term patches that we've seen Congress scramble together over the past year. So with all of that, we definitely expect the next floor activity up here to take place later in May, where we think the House will pass some of these bipartisan public health bills that the Committee on Energy and Commerce has been able to clear. These are non-controversial reauthorizing programs having to do with cardiac health and Alzheimer's and things like that. Moving on to the committees really quickly, just wanted to give a brief overview. On the Senate side, the Finance Committee has already begun a really busy April agenda. They kicked off with a subcommittee hearing on the care continuum for substance use disorder, followed by a physician payment reform and chronic care hearing. And they also plan to conduct oversight on cybersecurity, including the disruption caused by the Change Healthcare breach. This is something that committees across the spectrum, if they have any jurisdiction into, are really deciding that this is the time to dig into some of these cybersecurity issues. But we also anticipate them doing an educational hearing on policies impacting individuals duly eligible for Medicare and Medicaid. On the HELP Committee, the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, we anticipate a public health hearing and markup sometime before the May recess at Memorial Day. And this will include some key bio priorities, including reauthorizing the Pediatric Priority Review Voucher, the PPRV. Another thing pending at that committee, 340B has come up a lot on this call already. It's definitely an issue in Washington that folks are still looking to tackle, but we encounter some of the same issues up here, just with regards to the large hospital lobby and things like that. So just to give a quick update on where things are there, in September, the HELP ranking member, Bill Cassidy from Louisiana, he announced an investigation into hospital revenue generated by 340B programs and plans to leverage his findings to inform a proposal that we'll see down the road. There's also a Senate bipartisan gang of 6 senators working to put forward legislation to this end. They earlier this year provided a discussion draft of 340B policy proposals and have asked for feedback, bio-submitted feedback to that proposal. So if anyone would like a copy, please let me know, and we're happy to get that to you. While it's great that we have these 2 work streams going kind of simultaneously on the 340B reform, it's important to note that both policies would have to go through the HELP Committee, which is currently being led by Senator Bernie Sanders. And he has very much so made some other topics his priority, which we may have seen on cable news. And we haven't heard that he's expressed an interest in devoting time to this issue right now. So across the Capitol on the House side, the Energy and Commerce, oh, my lights just turned off. Sorry about that. Across the Capitol on the House side, Energy and Commerce Committee, they have already held hearings on the Pediatric Priority Review Voucher and other rare disease issues that are priorities of many bio companies. They had a hearing back at the end of February in honor of Rare Disease Day, where many of these issues were raised, including bio priorities related to IRA mitigation, like the Orphan Cures Act and the Mini Act. So those are all policies that we continue to work with legislators on that committee to move forward. And then on privacy, I also wanted to highlight that the chairwoman of Energy and Commerce, Kathy McMorris Rogers, has also released an agreement with Senator Cantwell from Washington State on the American Privacy Rights Act, which is draft comprehensive privacy legislation that would preempt state laws across the country. This is something that the chairwoman also, I think, really is hoping to pass before she leaves Congress at the end of the year. So it's something to keep an eye on. In short, from BIO's perspective, while we appreciate their interest in the issue and support a comprehensive privacy solution, we are working very closely with the sponsors to make sure that the legislation maintains a healthy environment for critical biomedical research, healthcare, and health and safety reporting activities. So from our perspective, that bill needs some work, but we really appreciate the sponsors being willing to work with us to get it to that spot. Over on the Ways and Means Committee, we are anticipating them having a markup on innovation policies across the board. So these would cover things like telehealth and, excuse me, other proposals along those lines. Perhaps even a scaled back version that would expand Medicare access to some of the anti-obesity medications that are out there. So that's something that we're tracking. And then lastly, from the committee perspective, the House Committee on Education and Workforce, they have started a work stream on the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, ERISA, and we expect the committee to hold a few more hearings looking at that. It's the 50th anniversary of ERISA, and so a lot of attention will be shed on that as well. So while it seems like September 30th and then November 11th, the week after election, seems far, far away at this point, there's definitely a slow and steady grind towards the end of the year that I think we'll look and see what happens leading up to September 30th and then the end of the year and where a healthcare package might end up being able to get slotted in. So expect to hear about a flutter of activity on the policies that I mentioned above. And we will see where the House and Senate can reach agreement on some of these policies. So with that, that's my update, but I'm happy to take any questions now or after Nick gives his update, however you all want to handle.
Yeah. No, thanks. And I think we're going to hear from Nick. And again, this is a lot of information coming at people, so I understand if there are any questions at the moment. And I know we have a lot of seasoned policy people listening into this too. So Nick, I'd love to hear the medtech side of things, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for thanks for having me. And Emily, I just wanted to say thank you. I feel like you took a lot off my plate, so thanks for covering. No. Thanks for covering all that. I'm gonna just hit a couple issues specific, starting with kind of where Emily left off. We have seen some movement on telehealth. ENC last week held a hearing. I think we still feel very positive that something will come together. It's still a bipartisan issue. So we're hopeful that we see something come together at the end of the year. We continue to push for R&D, the research and development tax credits. We were pleased to see that Senator Schumer put it in his Dear Colleague letter that went out last week. So we hope to see the Senate finally come together on something. The House has already passed that. So we're hopeful, but once again, as Emily kind of alluded to, there's a lot going on, and so we'll see what happens. The final thing I will bring up is something that AdvaMed has been working on very closely for a number of years. That is the breakthrough issue. Last June, CMS released TCIT. They released it as a notice, not as a rule, and TCIT is the transitional coverage for emerging technologies. This basically gives coverage, CMS coverage to breakthrough devices that have been approved by FDA. We have a bill in the House, HR 1691. Two of Georgia members, Mr. Ferguson and Mr. Carter, have signed on to the bill. We are working to increase the number of co-sponsors. We are also working in the Senate to continue to find a member who will introduce it in the Senate as well. So I will just ask you all, if you have any relationship with members of Congress in your delegation, and this is an issue for you, we'd love for you to reach out. We are happy to help. Also want to thank Georgia Bio for their efforts to support this issue as well. So I think that those are my main points, and just wanted to say thank you again for having us on. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Emily. That's all very helpful. As a reminder, we as an organization have regular calls with both Bio and AdvaMed. Seems almost weekly these days. So we appreciate the partnership on the Hill with both of you all as well. And congratulations on you both having successful fly-ins. I'm sure, Emily, you're going to be hopefully recovering a bit today after yesterday. I know the whole team comes in for that, but it's always a pleasure to work with you all. And during the off session, it's really when outside of Georgia State session, is when Mel and I really will start to pick up whatever we can here on the ground to prepare for our next state session, but additionally to be helpful to some of our federal issues with our congressional delegation out of Georgia here. So again, if you have any questions, drop in the chat, but if not, I think we will go ahead and move along to look ahead and some of our priorities moving into 2025 as an organization. So Mel will be joining, and I am going to share my screen just briefly. So bear with me if you don't mind, everybody. Here we go, full screen. So as a reminder, we as an organization We're here to do three core things: advocate, connect, and inspire. Today, we're focused on federal and state government relations. We try to do an update around this time every year in order to just remind people that we've just finished Georgia session and the work that we do on the ground for you all and some of our wins. We as an organization are going to be bringing on some new help to help with some public relations and economic development support as we move forward. We're also very excited to roll out some new programming in the coming weeks, and we've recently announced our Life Sciences Summit, which will take place October 21st and 22nd at Sandy Springs again. So I encourage everyone to save that date. We will have a full half-day company showcase the day before Summit on that Monday in order to really showcase, innovations across the state. And then finally, our workforce development program continues to grow and expand, and we're, really want to make concerted effort as we continue to grow our high school and middle school programming, but also work more closely with our technical colleges and create more awareness around careers in life sciences with those that are already on the market. But we encourage you to get plugged in, especially as we roll out opportunities for members to get involved with new committees that'll be launched in the next couple of weeks. So we'll look ahead. We have four core areas that we tend to bucket everything in every legislative session. Those are workforce development, economic incentives and tax reform, translational research, and patient access. As you can imagine, a lot of things that were covered today fall under one of these buckets. We have a deeper dive online overview of this at our website if you're interested. But these tend to be our consistent areas of focus. It is always critical for us to support GRA and all of our universities' research funding and continue to educate our leaders down at the state capitol on the importance of research. University research is definitely as a pipeline, a place for innovation start before they move into the private sector. Patient access to care, we have a strong partnership with the Coalition Advocates for Responsible Care. And we're very grateful to that relationship, especially when we're tackling a variety of issues such as share the savings. Additionally, they're a partner on the Rare Disease Advisory Council to the governor that I'll talk about in a little bit. Workforce and economic development and tax reform, there are a few things on that always come up. We will continue to every year work to ensure the Georgia-made Medical Manufacturing Act stays in place. This is the first and only specific incentive in the state of Georgia for the life sciences sector that allows companies to get they have an incentive as they hire manufacturing staff, and it is a rather significant one. So it has been used up every year. So we certainly encourage companies, if you're hiring in the manufacturing space, no matter how big or small you are, please ask us about this so you can take advantage of this act. But economic development and workforce development are critical to our advocacy efforts over the last, Sally said, 6 years since we've been working on workforce development. It has allowed us to build relationships to have harder conversations directly relevant to the industry. So, and it is also, as we look to recruit and work with the State Department of Economic Development to recruit and retain companies, it is the number one question we all get in the economic development space is workforce. And that will continue to happen. And that is, of course, a critical priority for Governor Kemp. So with that, I want to pass it over to Mel to make some remarks too.
Yep, absolutely. First, I just really want to thank everyone for working with me as I stumbled my way through my first Georgia session. It was great getting to work with all of you. And then as far as our additional funding, I just wanted to touch on kind of our plans for how we plan to spend that. And we will be able to increase our cohort trainings, which will be great. We'll be able to move them more into the urban areas, which is where the density of the industry sits. So that's great. And it's been extremely successful. As Sally and Maria have mentioned, we've had nearly 400 teachers go through this training, and therefore we've impacted over 50,000 students. And we are only going to see an increase in those numbers, which is exciting. And then also with this new funding, we'll be able to explore adding medical device training and labs into these training sessions. So we are very excited about that. And then I also want to touch on share the savings, as everyone pretty much has on this call, but that will remain a huge priority for us. We are committed to getting patients their savings, and they've already had to compromise from 100% to 80%, most recently 50%. So we anticipate trying to do a lot of education on that front and then return to tackling it next session. And another thing is we plan to submit some CDS requests for the next round of appropriations bills. And we haven't made our final decision on what that will be yet, but more to come there. And again, thank you all so much for working with me and just being so helpful, each of you individually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as Mel has gotten to know a lot of our policy committee members and our big company members, now that she's done running around the Capitol every day, we will work to introduce her more to some of our other members that are not as regularly involved in our policy work. So thank you, Mel, and for diving right in during session. So, and I just want to stress that workforce programming being in we've been throughout rural Georgia for many years now. We're very excited to enter the denser markets, particularly the Atlanta metro area, where we have a lot of need for training and introducing career pathways in the life sciences to young people. So I just want to touch on a few things as now that we're through session, and while we continue to monitor and support federal issues, we are looking to arrange some legislative tours for our legislators here in Georgia, some key ones. And while we might see a lot of new faces, as Sally indicated, next year, there are still some people we want to make sure we continue to build as champions as we continue to prioritize issues like share the savings, but also other issues that are likely to come up along the way. So if your company has the ability to host a tour or would work with us on a legislative tour, please let us know. We've tried to pull a few of these off during the off season, as we call it. And then the Rare Disease Advisory Council, which was put into place about 2 years ago, has finally gotten started. I sit in the industry seat, representing the industry on this council for the governor, and we began meeting about a month ago, and we had our second meeting yesterday to finalize our mission and get our priorities, begin to prioritize what we're going to do. This council will, while we're meeting monthly at the moment, that'll move to quarterly as things fall into place and our priorities fall into place. But I encourage you to just keep abreast, especially if your company is involved in rare disease, of what we're doing. We hope to have more information about that online as the council builds a website and a few other things. This is really an advisory council of the governor. There are a number of these around the country, and we will be looking at some of those best practices in other states, such as South Carolina is our closest nearby state that has one, and to see what they've done to help support rare disease patients, their caretakers, and of course the companies that are engaged in those patient populations. And then finally, a more immediate priority is we are going to be working with we are talking to the Department of Community Affairs around the Life Sciences Facilities Fund. I'm going to exit out of this really quick and stop sharing. The Life Sciences Facilities Fund is something that was founded, I want to say the program started back in 2005, 2006. And it is really the state's commitment to help expand the industry by investing into research infrastructure, eminent scholars, and commercialization assistance through GRA and state universities. That said, the fund has been limited in use for many years now. So we look forward to setting up some meetings with Department of Community Affairs to help grow this incentive program, which is a low-cost loan assistance to purchase fixed assets, to really help support and make sure that incentive remains in place and is being utilized in the most effective way. It is very important this gets reassessed because this has not really been tapped into in over a decade, well over a decade, and really looked at. So we're excited to revisit that. And look forward to meeting with leadership of the Department of Community Affairs as that moves forward. So with that, I think that covers everything in terms of a look ahead. Again, we always encourage our members to reach out to us if they need some support. And Mel and I are available to take even the smallest of questions, should you have that during session, outside of session. And there's no stupid question. I wanted to see if there are any questions. I have a hand raised from Imani Barnes. Am I able to unmute you? Let's see here. 2 seconds, Imani. There you go.
Good morning, everyone. Just wanted to introduce myself. I am a Georgia State legislator. I am a state representative for Tucker and also a scientist. So I drafted a biomedical bill this session, and I am looking forward to working closely with you with workforce.
I think I lost her there for a second, unless that was me.
Can you hear me now?
Now I can, yes.
Oh, sorry. Again, I'm going to introduce myself again. My name is Representative Imani Barnes. I am a scientist and also a Georgia State legislator. I did draft a biomedical bill this session. It got bipartisan support, but did not pass. So I just wanted to introduce myself and wanted to make sure I work closely with you guys in the summer and upcoming session to draft more science and bio legislation in our state.
Great. Thank you, Representative Barnes, for letting us know you're on the call. It's a pleasure to connect with you, and we look forward to setting up a meeting to get to know what that bill looked like a bit more and see how we could potentially work together.
Awesome.
I think that's important. And I would stress that our equipment depot, which is part of the state funding, where we take surplus and landfill-bound equipment and put into classrooms for free across the state, is based in Tucker. So,
oh wow!
I'll
definitely reach out to Melissa today.
Yes, and we'll arrange something. So thank you for letting us know you're on the call.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see here. Thank you, Dorothy. Dorothy heads up our partnership with Advocates for Responsible Care, and we look forward to continuing to work with you on Share the Savings, and hopefully with you and Pharma and other partners to make that successful next year. I think we're all very much ready for that. All right. Well, are there any other comments from anybody? I see Lynn Durham on the call as well with Georgia Core. I know y'all have had a very busy session as well, so I congratulate you on getting through session again. And additionally, I just want to acknowledge Tim Denning, who is the head of Georgia Research Alliance, and this is his first session as well. So it's great to have partners like you all, members that are really involved, and see how we can support each other. Well, if there are no other comments or questions, I'd like to thank all of our speakers, Mel and our team, and our, of course, our members for continuing to engage with us on these issues. And please don't hesitate to reach out on anything that you may have coming up, and stay tuned for a variety of ways to plug in with the organization, as well as please save the date for our annual conference, and keep an eye out for the date for our patient engagement conference that we will be planning in September, which will likely be a hybrid event, so which has historically just been virtual. So we're excited for that. But thank you. Anything else from you, Mel?
That's it for me. I just want to thank all of y'all for your time today, and for a really successful session.
Thank you, everybody. Everybody have a wonderful day.